Hollywood, a land where dreams are sold, where lights never dim, and where the faces on the big screen seem larger than life. It's a place built on glamour, perfection, and illusion. A place where every detail is carefully controlled. The polished red carpet smiles, the rehearsed sound bites on talk shows, the staged photographs that promise a life free of struggle. But if you peel back the glitter, if you look beyond the flash of cameras and the roar of applause, another story emerges. A story the public rarely sees. A story of fear, of struggle, of survival, and of courage. For every actor who captivates us on screen, there exists a real human being behind the curtain. Someone carrying doubts, insecurities, and secrets. Someone who has had to fight against the roles they've been given, not just on stage but in life itself. And among the many names in Hollywood's long history of reinvention, one stands out as a figure who dared to live his truth, no matter the cost. Neil Patrick Harris. To millions, Neil Patrick Harris is pure entertainment. The boy genius who became a doctor before he could drive in Doogie Howser, MD. The legendary Barney Stinson, the suit-wearing, smooth-talking, larger-than-life playboy of How I Met Your Mother. Or perhaps the unforgettable Hedwig, commanding the Broadway stage with raw, electric vulnerability in Hedwig and the Angry Inch. He has hosted award shows, dazzled with charm, and redefined what it means to be a performer in the modern age. But behind the applause, the magazine covers, and the Broadway lights, lies a deeper, more complicated truth. Because Neil Patrick Harris's story is not just about fame. It's about masks. The ones he wore as a child actor trying to meet impossible expectations, the ones he put on when Hollywood wasn't ready to accept a gay leading man, and the ones he eventually ripped away in a bold act of authenticity that changed the industry forever. Imagine being a teenager thrust into the spotlight, adored by millions, yet quietly wrestling with questions about who you really are. Imagine building a career playing characters that embody society's ideals, straight, charming, effortlessly confident, while knowing deep down that your reality was different. Imagine holding on to a secret that could have ended your career, while also longing for the day when you wouldn't have to hide anymore. This is the paradox of Neil Patrick Harris. The world saw one man, but he was becoming someone else entirely. And when he finally revealed that truth, when he came out as gay at the height of his success, he didn't just survive, he thrived. He became proof that authenticity could coexist with stardom, that honesty could lead not to downfall, but to reinvention. Yet the journey to that point wasn't easy. It was paved with challenges most people will never see. Typecasting, industry prejudice, the lingering shadows of child stardom, and the relentless pressure of fame. But through it all, Harris found ways to reinvent himself, to break through the cages Hollywood built around him. Today, Neil Patrick Harris stands as one of Hollywood's most celebrated openly gay actors. A father, a husband, an entertainer, and a symbol of change. But his story is not just about the man he became. It is about the battles he fought silently, the risks he took publicly, and the legacy he created for those who would follow. So tonight we go beyond the glitter, beyond the charming grin and the witty one-liners. We strip away the illusion and uncover the man behind the roles. This is the story of Neil Patrick Harris, the rise, the reinvention, the struggles, and the triumph of an actor who refused to let Hollywood dictate who he should be. Because sometimes the greatest performance an actor can give is the courage to stop performing altogether. Neil Patrick Harris's story doesn't begin on a stage or in front of a camera. It begins in the quiet desert city of Albuquerque, New Mexico, where he was born on June 15, 1973, to Sheila and Ron Harris. His parents were not actors, not moguls, not Hollywood insiders. They were lawyers who also ran a small restaurant, grounded in a world that seemed worlds away from flashing cameras and red carpets. They lived in the small town of Ruidoso, a mountain community surrounded by pines and desert skies. To outsiders, Neil's childhood looked ordinary, almost predictable. But within this boy was a spark that refused to be ordinary. Where other children chased footballs across dusty fields, Neil chased stories. Where others filled notebooks with homework, Neil filled his imagination with characters. His world wasn't confined to Ruidoso. It stretched far beyond, into the endless possibilities of make-believe. He gravitated toward the stage instinctively, as though performing were part of his DNA. School plays became his sanctuary, a place where he could step out of the everyday and into someone else's shoes. The small-town boy wasn't content just watching movies. He wanted to live inside them. His teachers quickly noticed his talent. His classmates may have seen a friend, but audiences, even in those early years, saw a performer. By the time Neil reached adolescence, it was clear he wasn't like other kids. While his peers planned for football games and part-time jobs, Neil was already chasing auditions and standing in the wings of community theaters. It wasn't about fame yet, it was about passion. Acting didn't feel like a choice. Felt like a calling. Then fate intervened. During a summer drama camp, Neil crossed paths with playwright Mark Medoff, best known for Children of a Lesser God. Medoff saw something undeniable in the boy. Raw talent, charisma, and a natural ease in front of an audience. He recommended Neil for a role in the upcoming film Clara's Heart, 1988, starring none other than Whoopi Goldberg. It was a leap most children would never even dream of, but Neil stepped into it with surprising confidence. On set, he didn't just keep up with seasoned actors. He thrived among them. His performance as David Hart, a troubled young boy, resonated with audiences and critics alike. For someone barely 15 years old, his work was remarkably mature. He wasn't just reciting lines, he was living them. That performance earned him a Golden Globe nomination, a staggering achievement for a teenager from a small town in New Mexico with no Hollywood lineage to his name. Overnight, doors began to open. Neil Patrick Harris was no longer just a gifted boy from Ruidoso. He was a rising star. But what's most remarkable about this moment is not just the nomination, or the critical acclaim, or the fact that he held his own alongside Whoopi Goldberg. It's that Neil's career didn't start because of connections or privilege. It started because of undeniable talent, a spark that refused to be ignored. Still, this was only the beginning. The world had only caught a glimpse of what he could do. No one yet knew that this boy, with his disarming smile and instinctive talent, would soon become one of television's most recognizable faces. The young actor from Albuquerque was on the verge of stepping into a role that would define an era and cement his place in Hollywood history. In 1989, television audiences were introduced to something they had never seen before. A teenage genius, brilliant enough to graduate medical school, yet still fumbling through the ordinary chaos of adolescence. The role was Doogie Howser, MD, and the actor behind it was a fresh-faced 16-year-old named Neil Patrick Harris. Overnight, Neil went from a promising young actor with one Golden Globe nomination to the face of one of the most talked-about television shows of its time. The premise was irresistible. What if a prodigy could not only excel academically but step directly into one of the most demanding professions in the world, medicine, before he was even old enough to drive? Doogie Howser was not just a doctor. He was a symbol of possibility, of brilliance packaged into youth. He stitched wounds, delivered diagnoses, and saved lives, all while struggling with the typical teenage dilemmas of curfews, friendships, and first loves. Audiences adored it. The show struck a chord with families, children, and adults alike. Parents admired the character's intelligence and work ethic. Teenagers related to his awkward attempts to navigate growing up. And Neil's performance, endearing, intelligent, and deeply human, cemented him as the beating heart of the series. It wasn't long before Doogie Howser became a household name. The character entered the cultural lexicon, referenced in jokes, talk shows, and even political commentary. Doogie was everywhere. For Neil, the sudden fame was exhilarating but also overwhelming. Almost overnight, he went from a small-town boy from Ruidoso, New Mexico, to a television star recognized on the streets of Los Angeles, New York, and everywhere in between. He couldn't go to the grocery store without being mobbed. Reporters wanted interviews. Magazines wanted his face on their covers. Fans wanted autographs. He was no longer just Neil, he was Doogie. But as with so many young actors, the image that brought him fame quickly became a double-edged sword. Hollywood has a way of boxing people in, and for Neil that box was the boy genius in a lab coat. Casting directors, producers, and even audiences struggled to separate the actor from the character. Could this sweet-faced prodigy ever convincingly play anything else? Privately, Neil wrestled with the weight of the persona thrust upon him. On the surface, he was celebrated as the clean-cut American success story. Behind the curtain, however, he was a teenager grappling with questions about who he truly was. Questions about identity, about attraction, about authenticity. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Hollywood was not a safe place for actors to openly explore or admit to being gay. Careers could be destroyed by rumors alone. For a young man at the peak of fame, with millions watching his every move, silence felt like the only option. The show ran until 1993, lasting 4 seasons. By the time the final episode aired, Neil was just 20 years old. In television years, he was still incredibly young, but in Hollywood years, he was already facing a crisis familiar to many child stars: typecasting. Would the industry ever allow him to shed Doogie's lab coat, or would he forever be defined by a role he had played as a teenager? The years that followed were uncertain. Neil found himself at a crossroads. He was too talented to fade into obscurity, but too associated with Doogie to easily step into new leading roles. In many ways, his early success had become both a blessing and a trap. Audiences loved him, but they loved him as Doogie. And Neil, ambitious and restless, wanted more. This period of his life was marked by searching, professionally and personally. He took on guest roles in television, smaller parts in films, and even stage performances, all in an attempt to redefine himself. He was no longer the wide-eyed boy who had stunned Hollywood at 15. He was an actor trying to grow, to expand, to evolve. And yet, all the while, he carried a secret that he wasn't ready to share with the world: the truth of his sexuality. The irony is almost poetic. While millions adored him as Doogie Howser, the boy genius who seemed to have all the answers, Neil himself was quietly navigating some of life's hardest questions. Questions without scripts. Questions without laugh tracks. Questions that no television character could answer for him. As the glow of Doogie began to fade, Neil Patrick Harris was left with both a gift and a challenge. He had captured America's attention. But now he would have to prove to Hollywood and to himself that he was more than just a teenage doctor. The 1990s were a proving ground for Neil Patrick Harris. After the spotlight of Doogie Howser MD dimmed, Hollywood did what it often does to its child stars. It moved on. The same executives and casting directors who once clamored for his talent now seemed to struggle with where he fit. To them, Neil was frozen in time as the teenage prodigy in a lab coat. But to Neil, who was growing into adulthood, there was a hunger to evolve, to show the world he was more than Doogie. It wasn't easy. The 1990s became a patchwork of guest roles and smaller opportunities. He appeared on shows like Murder, She Wrote and Quantum Leap, sliding into short arcs that allowed him to stretch but rarely made headlines. He experimented with television movies, the kinds that came and went on a Sunday night with little fanfare. For every interesting part, there were others that were forgettable. Still, Neil persisted, quietly building his skills, learning resilience, and, perhaps most importantly, learning to be patient. Theater, however, became his lifeline. Broadway stages welcomed him with open arms, offering a creative sanctuary away from the pigeonholing of Hollywood. In productions like Rent and Cabaret, Harris reinvented himself night after night, proving that he could sing, dance, and command a live audience. Broadway became his training ground, sharpening his confidence and reminding him that his career was not over. It was merely evolving. In theater, Neil wasn't the kid from Doogie Howser. He was a performer, a showman, an artist capable of transformation. And then came the twist no one saw coming. In 2004, Neil Patrick Harris appeared in the raunchy stoner comedy Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. But this wasn't Neil playing a doctor, a detective, or even a Broadway lead. This was Neil playing Neil. Or at least, a wildly exaggerated version of himself. Reckless, drug-fueled, hilariously inappropriate. The cameo was outrageous and self-aware, a direct parody of his squeaky clean image. Audiences roared with laughter, critics were stunned, and suddenly Neil Patrick Harris was back on the map. He had done something that few actors from his background ever dared. He poked fun at himself, dismantled his old image, and emerged with a brand new reputation. The success of that cameo opened doors that had long been closed. Casting directors began to see him differently, not just as the boy genius from the 80s but as a versatile actor unafraid of reinvention. And then, in 2005, came the role that would redefine his career. Barney Stinson on How I Met Your Mother. For 9 seasons, Neil embodied Barney, the ultimate bachelor, a man obsessed with suits, women, and outrageous schemes. He was charming, infuriating, hilarious, and endlessly quotable. Barney became a cultural icon, the kind of character audiences imitated at parties and recited catchphrases from. Legendary. Suit up. Challenge accepted. Neil didn't just play Barney. He owned him. The irony, of course, was striking. Here was Neil Patrick Harris, a gay man in his private life, playing television's most notorious womanizer. On screen, Barney pursued women with relentless confidence. Off-screen, Neil was quietly navigating a truth he still hadn't shared with the public. But this duality, this sharp contrast between who he was and who he portrayed, only deepened the admiration for his craft. Audiences had no idea they were watching a man masterfully performing a role that was the polar opposite of his reality. Professionally, How I Met Your Mother was a gift. It gave Neil mainstream fame again, but this time on his own terms. He wasn't trapped as Doogie. He wasn't reduced to a parody of himself. He was a central player in one of television's biggest sitcoms of the 2000s, earning critical praise, Emmy nominations, and the kind of cultural relevance most actors can only dream of. Privately, though, the role highlighted the tension he lived with. He could make millions laugh as Barney Stinson, but when the cameras turned off, he remained cautious about revealing his authentic self. The industry had grown somewhat more accepting since the 1990s, but coming out still carried risk. For an actor who had just clawed his way back to stardom, the decision weighed heavily. Still, in reinventing his career, Neil Patrick Harris had proved something important. He wasn't a relic of 80s television. He was an actor with staying power, one willing to take risks, laugh at himself, and transform with each role. The boy genius had grown up, and he had survived Hollywood's attempts to box him in. What audiences didn't yet know was that Neil's next reinvention wouldn't just reshape his career, it would reshape how the world saw him as a person. By the mid-2000s, Neil Patrick Harris was enjoying a career renaissance. His portrayal of Barney Stinson on How I Met Your Mother had made him a household name again, beloved by both critics and audiences. But behind the scenes, Neil lived with a secret, one that the Hollywood system, until very recently, warned could end a career. For years, rumors had swirled. Tabloids speculated. Whispers followed him on red carpets. In an industry where leading men were still expected to embody heterosexual ideals, actors who identified as gay were often told to keep quiet. The unspoken rule was clear: if you want to keep working, keep your private life hidden. For many, the cost of honesty was typecasting, exclusion, or even outright rejection from roles. Neil understood that risk. But he also knew the weight of carrying a truth you can't share. By 2006, he was in a loving relationship with actor and chef David Burtka, and he had reached a point in life where pretending no longer felt like an option. Rather than allow rumors to define him, Neil chose to take control of the narrative himself. In November 2006, he released a statement through People magazine. It was simple, heartfelt, and free of sensationalism. I am happy to dispel any rumors or misconceptions and am quite proud to say that I am a very content gay man living my life to the fullest and feel most fortunate to be working with wonderful people in the business I love. It was a watershed moment. Unlike many coming-out stories in Hollywood, this wasn't accompanied by scandal, shame, or a tearful press conference. It was matter-of-fact, dignified, and confident, exactly in line with who Neil Patrick Harris was. The public reaction was groundbreaking. Instead of backlash, Neil was met with widespread support and admiration. Audiences didn't turn away. If anything, they leaned in closer. Fans marveled at his courage. Critics praised his honesty. And what's more, How I Met Your Mother didn't lose momentum. In fact, Barney Stinson only grew in popularity. It was living proof that an actor's sexuality off-screen didn't have to dictate the roles they could play on screen. Hollywood took note. Harris shattered one of the industry's longest-standing taboos: the belief that a gay man could not convincingly play a straight heartthrob or womanizer. Week after week, he proved that acting was about talent, not labels. The irony wasn't lost on audiences. Barney Stinson, television's most notorious ladies' man, was being brought to life by a gay actor. But instead of undermining the character, this revelation made Harris's performance even more impressive. It highlighted the sheer range of his abilities. Beyond his work on How I Met Your Mother, Neil's career only expanded. He became a go-to host for some of the biggest award shows in the world, bringing humor, charm, and Broadway-level showmanship to the Tonys, Emmys, and eventually even the Oscars. He was no longer just an actor, he was a cultural figure, a symbol of how authenticity and artistry could coexist at the highest levels of entertainment. Culturally, his decision to come out was bigger than himself. For LGBTQ+ youth, Neil became a beacon of hope, a living example that being true to oneself didn't mean sacrificing dreams. For Hollywood, his success cracked the door open wider, proving that audiences were ready to embrace actors for their talent rather than box them into outdated stereotypes. On a personal level, coming out allowed Neil to live without pretense. His relationship with David Burtka became public, and the two eventually became one of Hollywood's most admired couples. They would go on to marry in 2014 and build a family together, raising twins, Gideon and Harper. Neil's journey wasn't just about surviving Hollywood. It was about thriving in it while living authentically. Looking back, 2006 wasn't just a turning point in Neil Patrick Harris's career. It was a turning point in Hollywood. He didn't just redefine himself. He redefined what was possible for actors like him. His courage sent a clear message. Success doesn't require hiding. It requires honesty, craft, and the bravery to be who you are. For Neil Patrick Harris, the boy who once felt boxed in by the role of Doogie Howser, the man who once questioned whether Hollywood would allow him a future, the moment of coming out wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new one where he could stand on stage in front of millions and know that he was finally, fully, unapologetically himself. While Neil Patrick Harris was reinventing himself as a performer and carving a space in Hollywood where he could thrive, his personal life was quietly blossoming into something even more meaningful. In 2004, he met actor and chef David Burtka. Their first encounter wasn't love at first sight. It was, in Neil's own words, a slow-burning connection that deepened with time. But once it sparked, it never went out. At the time, Harris had not yet come out publicly. For that reason, the early days of their romance were cautious, even secretive. Hollywood was still a place where same-sex relationships could derail opportunities. The couple balanced private affection with public discretion, relying on close friends and trusted circles to share in their happiness. Yet even in those early years, their bond was strong. Burtka's warmth, humor, and culinary passions matched Neil's creative energy, giving him stability at a time when his career was in flux. Everything shifted in 2006 when Harris publicly came out. Suddenly, the relationship that had been lived in the shadows could be embraced in the light. From that moment forward, Neil and David became one of Hollywood's most admired couples, admired not just for their talent but for their authenticity. Their love story reached a new milestone in 2010, when they welcomed twins, Gideon and Harper, via surrogate. For Neil, becoming a father was transformative. The man who had once been known for playing a boy genius or a serial womanizer was now tackling the real role of a lifetime: being a dad. Parenthood reshaped his priorities, grounding him in a way that no career success ever could. The world, too, was fascinated. Pictures of the Harris-Burtka family began to circulate online, not staged, but filled with everyday joy. Trick-or-treating in over-the-top Halloween costumes, family vacations, cozy snapshots of birthdays and milestones. Audiences who had admired Neil as an actor now saw something deeper. A devoted father, a playful parent, and a partner building a life centered on love and stability. Their family became a symbol of what was possible, challenging outdated stereotypes about same-sex couples and parenthood. Then, in September 2014, after more than a decade together, Neil and David married in a beautiful ceremony in Italy. It wasn't just any wedding, it was a celebration of love, equality, and perseverance. Elton John, a friend and fellow trailblazer, performed at the event, giving the occasion a kind of poetic symmetry. Here was a couple whose love had once been hidden, now standing in full view of the world, with one of the most iconic gay musicians in history serenading their union. The wedding carried enormous cultural significance. Marriage equality was still being debated across the United States at the time, and their celebration served as a reminder of how far things had come, and how far they still had to go. For countless LGBTQ+ fans, seeing Neil Patrick Harris, one of the most visible gay actors in the world, marry the love of his life was more than a celebrity headline. It was hope. As years passed, family remained Neil's anchor. Hollywood is a whirlwind of flashing cameras, award shows, and constant reinvention. But behind the curtain, Harris's happiest role was that of husband and father. In interviews, he often spoke about how his children grounded him, how he and David strived to create a home filled with creativity, laughter, and stability. Their Halloween costumes became legendary not because they were extravagant, but because they were designed as family projects, full of imagination and unity. The Harris Burtka family became a picture of modern love. Two fathers raising children in an environment of care and joy, celebrated not for being unusual but for being wonderfully ordinary. In a world where LGBTQ+ families had long been pushed to the margins, Neil and David were helping to normalize what should never have been seen as unusual in the first place. For Neil Patrick Harris, love and family provided something Hollywood could not: permanence. Roles come and go, fame rises and falls, but his relationship and his children gave him roots. They gave him perspective, reminding him that at the end of the day, the glitz of the industry mattered far less than the laughter around the dinner table, the joy of bedtime stories, and the comfort of knowing he had built a family with the man he loved. The boy who once grew up under the spotlight, struggling with identity and the pressure of fame, had found a place where he could simply be himself, at home, surrounded by love. Neil Patrick Harris has never been content to live in just one lane. If his early years proved he could carry a television show, and How I Met Your Mother proved he could reinvent himself on the small screen, then Broadway and the world of live hosting revealed the full extent of his artistry. Harris wasn't simply an actor. He was a showman in the truest sense of the word. His journey onto Broadway was more than a career pivot. It was a declaration. He first made waves with standout performances in productions like Cabaret, Company, and Assassins, earning praise for his ability to move effortlessly between comedy, drama, and music. But his defining moment on stage came in 2014, when he starred in Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Taking on the role of Hedwig, a genderqueer East German rock singer, demanded fearlessness. It was flamboyant, raw, vulnerable, and utterly magnetic. Harris poured himself into the part, earning a Tony Award for Best Actor in a Musical. Critics hailed the performance as a revelation, proving that Harris was not just a versatile actor, but an artist capable of embodying roles that demanded emotional depth and physical daring. But Broadway wasn't his only stage. Almost simultaneously, Harris reinvented himself yet again, this time as Hollywood's go-to master of ceremonies. Hosting award shows is notoriously difficult. Too safe and you bore the audience, too risky and you alienate them. Yet Harris struck the perfect balance. With razor-sharp wit, boundless energy, and a knack for show-stopping musical numbers, he transformed ceremonies into must-watch events. At the Tony Awards, his playful, elaborate opening numbers became the stuff of legend, blending humor, song, and self-aware theatricality. His hosting of the Emmy Awards brought a similar sparkle, earning him multiple Emmys for his work. And when he hosted the Academy Awards in 2015, Harris joined the rarefied club of entertainers trusted with Hollywood's biggest night. Whether performing magic tricks, delivering rapid-fire jokes, or breaking into Broadway-worthy songs, he commanded the stage with ease. What made Harris so effective as a host was his authenticity. He wasn't just reading scripted jokes. He was a performer who could sing, dance, improvise, and charm millions of viewers simultaneously. In an age when many awards shows struggled to stay relevant, Harris injected vitality and made them feel like true spectacles again. Through Broadway and hosting, Harris solidified his place as a Hollywood power player, someone who could move between mediums with confidence, bridging the gap between theater, television, and film. He wasn't confined to sitcoms or remembered as a child prodigy anymore. He was an entertainer who had mastered nearly every form of performance available to him. And yet, beneath the glitz, the story was still about resilience. Child stars often fade. Actors who come out publicly often face typecasting. Many performers who chase Broadway or live hosting fall short. Neil Patrick Harris defied all of those odds. His career arc became less about one big role and more about constant reinvention. Each reinvention carried risk, but Harris thrived on that risk. To play Hedwig meant stepping into a role few mainstream actors would dare. To host live television meant risking failure in front of millions. To move between sitcoms, films, theater, and hosting meant never allowing himself to be boxed in. And in every case, Harris didn't just succeed. He excelled. By the mid-2010s, Neil Patrick Harris had transformed from a nostalgic face of the 90s into one of the most respected, versatile, and beloved entertainers in the industry. His Broadway triumphs and hosting brilliance were not detours from his career. They were the proof that his career was built on reinvention itself. From Doogie Howser to Barney Stinson, from Hedwig to the Oscar stage, Harris showed the world that true artistry lies not in holding on to one identity, but in having the courage to embrace many. Today, Neil Patrick Harris lives a life that reflects both balance and ambition. While many child stars disappear from the public eye or fade into nostalgia, Harris remains a constant presence in Hollywood and beyond. He continues to act in television and film, but his career now stretches far wider. Into producing, writing, voice acting, and even magic, a lifelong passion that has remained a defining part of his identity. In recent years, Harris has embraced a wide variety of roles. He dazzled audiences in Netflix's adaptation of a series of unfortunate events, where he played the delightfully villainous Count Olaf. It was another reinvention, showing his ability to carry a major streaming series with theatrical flair. In 2021, he joined The Matrix Resurrections, holding his own in one of the most iconic sci-fi franchises of all time. More recently, he starred in the Netflix/Showtime series Uncoupled, portraying a middle-aged gay man navigating love and heartbreak in New York City. Unlike his earlier roles, Uncoupled allowed Harris to bring parts of his own lived experience into the character, blending comedy and poignancy with authenticity. He also surprised fans by taking on a villainous role in Doctor Who, proving once again that he thrives on versatility. Outside of acting, Harris has cultivated a reputation as a creator. He is an accomplished author, with his children's book series The Magic Misfits introducing young readers to the world of friendship, adventure, and illusion. The books are a reflection not only of his passion for magic but also of his desire to inspire the next generation. He has also worked behind the camera as a producer, ensuring that his creative voice extends beyond his performances. And then, of course, there is magic. Long before Broadway and television, Harris was captivated by the art of illusion. He is a dedicated magician, having served as president of the Academy of Magical Arts, the organization behind the famed Magic Castle in Los Angeles. For Harris, magic isn't just a hobby. It's a lifelong love, a reminder that wonder and imagination are as vital to storytelling as scripts and stages. But perhaps his most enduring role is off-screen, that of husband and father. His marriage to David Burtka remains one of Hollywood's most admired partnerships. Together, they are raising their twins, Gideon and Harper, who are growing up in a household defined by love, creativity, and laughter. Fans often catch glimpses of their family life through social media. Halloween costumes, family vacations, candid moments that show Harris not as an actor or entertainer, but as a devoted parent. In a world where celebrity families are often scrutinized or glamorized, Harris and Burtka have offered something different: authenticity, joy, and normalcy. Neil Patrick Harris's legacy, however, is not only measured in roles, awards, or even family life. It is measured in the barriers he helped break. When he came out in 2006, he risked being typecast or dismissed in an industry that still carried heavy prejudice. Instead, he thrived, proving that being openly gay was not a limitation but a strength. He played straight roles convincingly, embodied flamboyant theatrical characters with brilliance, and hosted the most prestigious award shows with charm, all while living authentically. For younger LGBTQ+ performers, Harris stands as proof that honesty and success can coexist. His career challenges Hollywood's long history of forcing queer actors to hide their true selves. He didn't just break a mold, he reshaped it. Today, more openly gay actors are thriving in mainstream roles, and Harris's journey is part of the reason why. Culturally, his impact stretches further. To some, he will always be Doogie Howser, the prodigy who symbolized youthful brilliance in the 90s. To others, he will forever be Barney Stinson, the larger-than-life Lothario who became one of sitcom history's most iconic characters. To theater fans, he is Hedwig, the fearless, glittering performer who left audiences breathless. And to his family, he is simply Neil, a husband, a father, and a man who has built a life rooted in authenticity. His story ultimately is not just about fame. It is about resilience, adaptability, and the courage to live without masks in a world that often demands them. It is about showing that true artistry comes not from pretending to be something you are not, but from embracing everything you are. In the grand history of Hollywood, Neil Patrick Harris will be remembered not only as a versatile performer but as a symbol of change. His legacy is both personal and universal, a reminder that authenticity, resilience, and reinvention can transform not just a career, but an entire industry. Hollywood has always been a land of illusions, a place where lights dazzle, roles shift, and identities blur. For decades, the industry asked its stars to hide pieces of themselves, to tuck away their truths for the sake of box office safety. Many complied, living behind carefully constructed masks. But every once in a while, a star appears who refuses to hide, who chooses honesty over illusion. Neil Patrick Harris is one such star. His journey is extraordinary not only for its longevity, but for its transformation. From child prodigy to sitcom legend, from Broadway powerhouse to award show maestro, Harris has continually reinvented himself. But his greatest reinvention wasn't about a role, a character, or a performance. It was about himself. It was about choosing authenticity in a world that often punishes it. When Harris came out, he did what so many before him feared. He risked it all. And instead of falling, he soared. He proved to Hollywood, and to the world, that talent and truth can coexist, that honesty does not diminish artistry, and that an openly gay actor could still play the womanizer, the villain, the hero, or the star. He didn't just expand his own career. He expanded the possibilities for countless others. In exposing his truth, Neil Patrick Harris didn't only change his life. He helped change Hollywood. He redefined what it meant to be a leading man. He showed studios that audiences could embrace actors for who they are, not just who they pretend to be. And for millions watching, especially those struggling with their own identities, he offered something priceless: hope. The boy genius grew up. The charming playboy revealed his reality. The Broadway star shed glitter and makeup to show raw brilliance. And through it all, Neil Patrick Harris left behind something bigger than any single role: the courage to be yourself. That is his true magic. Not just the sleight of hand he performs on stage, but the magic of authenticity, the kind that inspires, uplifts, and endures. In a city built on make-believe, Harris's legacy is proof that the greatest performance of all is living truthfully. And so, in the grand theater of Hollywood, where roles come and go and stories fade with time, one truth remains. Neil Patrick Harris stands as a reminder that sometimes the bravest act isn't stepping into a role, it's stepping into your own light.